Welcome. So in this video I did want to talk about the Fold 4 and just a user review, I guess, of it after nearly half a year. It's been close to half a year since it's been released, and I basically got it right off the bat, like when it came out. So I did want to touch upon how it's been holding up, how it's been to use this kind of device with a folding display, and all the kind of things that people that are thinking about foldable devices might be worrying about. For instance, the display inside, how did it stand up over the past 5 months or so right now? A little bit over 5 months, I think. And also a couple drawbacks of just Samsung itself device, and I guess the foldable problem. I'm not exactly sure who's to blame here, if it's Android or Samsung, but I'll touch upon the problems that I had experienced and just kind of give a user overview of the problems and the benefits that I had using this device over the past several months. So anyway, let's just get straight to it. Now, one thing that I'll start off with is the refresh rate, which I did want to start off by kind of taking a steaming dump on it, but with the release of the Android 13, because this device already got an upgrade to Android 13, this is no longer a problem, and they went even a step further and improved it even to better extent. So this phone has 120 Hz refresh rate as max refresh rate, but when it came out with Android 12L, the problem was that, number one, if you enabled the dynamic or whatever refresh rate is here, let me just quickly find it under the display, there we go. So motion smoothness, it's now set to standard, but here comes the weirdness, which is a positive thing that they have changed. If I open it up, you can see that it's now adaptive. I haven't changed it. I can have two different display refresh rates depending on which display is being used. So inner one is set to 120, while the outer one is set to 60, giving me options. But when the device came out, that was not the case. You would set it and both of them would be running at 120, and worst part of that is that the outside one, I think, downclocked to 24 Hz, while the inside stayed at 60 from 120, so it didn't drop to that advertised 24 frames. Obviously it's not dropping to 1 frame like some other devices, which would be even better, but yeah, you have two displays, and the inner one, which consumes more of your power, didn't even drop as low, which was kind of like, why though? But now both of them do drop to 24, and you have separate options for both of them, so that's really nice. And on top of that, even though the outside one, this one, the cover display, is running at is running at 60, it still downclocks to 24, so it still uses that adaptive refresh rate, so it gives you even better battery life, which is really nice, because battery life here is one of the problems, at least for me. So let me just quickly show you the refresh rate here. So show refresh rate 120, 24, and if I close it, you'll see the same kind of display, 60 and 120. And obviously if I enable it, actually I haven't tried it, so let's see, maybe there is still some kind of refresh problem. Standard, adaptive, boom, apply. No, it still changes to 24, which is nice. So we can have basically two different display refresh rates, which gives us just more versatility. That's good. That's a good option here. Now, moving on to the thing that has been annoying me a bit is the crease that I have on, obviously, on all the Samsung. And don't worry, this is standard smudging. This is what you expect from foldable device. Because you probably were worried about scratching the display. That's basically what I've been. So I've been using just microfiber cloths when I have them around, but when I don't, the screen will look like this. Now, downside of screen looking like this is that when you're, for instance, commuting to work, as an example, which is my case, and I'm watching something on this display. When light hits it, the fingerprints basically become an obstacle, which is pretty annoying. So at that point, I basically need to somehow get rid of this, while also having in my mind that I could possibly scratch the display. So that's one thing. Now, apart from the fingerprints that you can see, you have this crease right here, and contrary to what people will tell you, that you get used to it, I will be honest, that's bullshit. You don't. When the light hits it just right, when you're, for instance, watching some show, and the light just gets right there, oh boy, you cannot unsee it. It's just glaring there. It's always reflecting the light somehow. So my biggest problem here is basically watching something and having this kind of thing. You have dark environment, and then you have this reflection of sunlight somewhere. And even though technically, I mean, I could, for instance, this is just a light. So imagine when you're just having sunlight being reflected on you all the time, almost in majority of the angles, even when technically light isn't hitting the display, like right here, it is hitting in that crease. So it is pretty freaking annoying, I'm not gonna lie. And like I said, one of the things that basically everybody says, you get used to it. No, you don't. Let's be honest, when the light hits it perfectly like that, you don't get used to it. It just basically becomes a nice reflective surface no matter how you position it. So pretty annoying. So that's one problem that I have been having that personally to me, it kind of gets to me. Now another problem is with the display brightness. Obviously when you're outside, like I said, commuting and the light hits the display, max brightness of this inside display isn't that high. I feel like personally it could go higher, especially if you compare it to something like the iPhones, which had like 2000 in its peak brightness, I think it was. This just falls flat. And when you also consider the fact that this phone costs significantly more than almost any other phone on the market, it really becomes a kind of a hard pill to swallow. Damn, that was massive tongue twister. Hard pill to swallow. There we go. Not sure what happened there with my brain. But anyway, continuing. So brightness is one of those things that I feel like it's lacking on this device. And obviously also running this display at a higher brightness will consume more battery, which brings me back to another thing, which is battery life. So I've been using as much as I possibly can the cover display, just so I can get as much battery life as I can. I am personally used to having my devices last me about 2 days. I'm not a heavy phone user, so I use it primarily when I'm commuting and just like typical message replies when I'm getting, when I need to do it at work, reply to something. That's basically when I use my device. For the most part, I tend to use my computer. So the phone during, for instance, work hours just lays for the most part unused. And same goes for when I get back home. I don't really use it at home all that much. I'm not like watching videos, playing games constantly on it. So I expect my phone to last me about 2 days, usual. At least that's what I used to have my phone last, which was the Mate 20 Pro. And that phone, again, I try to save up on battery everywhere I could. So I wasn't running like 120 Hz because that phone didn't have that option. Let's start with that. But I also tried to minimize the amount of background activities that were running on the device. And I do the same thing right here. So I tend to only use Wi-Fi or mobile data at once. I tend to also turn off NFC. Location as one of those things that I would turn off, but a lot of applications that I use always give me shit for needing a location. I absolutely hate this. I feel like Android should apply some kind of change that I can just spoof the applications into thinking that location is enabled and just give them some random ass location in Siberia, for instance. I don't care. That application doesn't need my location. It shouldn't need it. So that's one of the things that I would like to turn off, but I just can't. And that's basically all I would be using. Either Wi-Fi, mobile data, and Bluetooth. That's it. So also brightness, this is my typical brightness at half right here. Though obviously this will vary a little bit. considering I am indoors. If I go outside at half brightness, I think it's a little bit brighter than it is indoors, just because the light sensors will pick it up and give you just a little bit of a brighter display to combat the sunlight, for instance. So obviously I'm not a massive power user. Now right now it's 4:20 almost, and I am at 27% battery life, and the device was being charged yesterday afternoon, like at about 8 p.m. I did use it a little bit in bed, just browsing the web, watching YouTube videos, but like right now there is not much battery left. I will need to charge it again today. So this phone barely lasts me a day, and that is one of those things that I do have a problem. I try to preserve battery as much as I can. I'm not even using, for the most part, 120 Hz refresh rate on both of the displays. They're usually running at 60, and still that barely gets me, well, obviously it won't come to 2 days, that's for sure. Which previously I would gain 2 days, no problem. Now, moving on to another problem which comes out of charging it frequently is the stupid effing charging. Samsung, if I could send them a message, just if anybody hears this from Samsung, what the are you doing with your charging? How am I grabbing, for instance, cable like this, and it will connect to my freaking computer, but then I grab a different cable like this and it just won't. Both of them are Type-C. Either this is a standard freaking port or it's not. Decide it. Type-C is a standardized charging method along with connection. Use the thing to have it standardized. So, it's not only that it's not connecting to my PC that is a problem. I have a power bank, which I tend to use, with their cable. The Samsung cable that came in the box. Sometimes it will charge, sometimes it will tell me that it's charging while it's not charging, and sometimes it will just flat out freaking not charge at all. That is effing infuriating. When you plug in your device, it's almost dead, like it's always, and you see, oh cool, it's charging, it's giving me the indication that it's charging, right? You have the little circle with all the thing, and then you come back to your device and it's dead because it's not actually charging. It's just giving you a spoof information that it's charging, and just so this is clear, this is not the fault of my power bank. It charges almost every other device, no problem. It charges my Huawei, never a single hiccup. It charges any device at work that obviously isn't Samsung, no problem. But Samsung needs to be special with their freaking stupid Type-C that isn't actually Type-C. It resembles the same thing, but it always gives you shit when you connect some other cable that isn't theirs. Make the effing port be Type-C and work with every cable that I throw at it. That's the point of the port. So that was probably one of the most infuriating things that I've been experiencing with this device. As you can probably tell from my my delivery of it. Now, moving on to the next thing that isn't necessarily working too great is launchers. That is one of the biggest problems that I've been also having. I tend to use my launcher. It's a smart launcher, 5 or 6 or whatever number they're on now. It's one of the ones that I just personally do prefer. It works really nicely. It has nice categories. That's kind of what I love about it. But using, for instance, gestures, and if you remove this little bar right here, because you can remove this, so it's shifting everything a little bit lower. Ooh boy, that's where the problems start. So you will be swiping 5 freaking times sometimes at just to go home once, because the device can't figure out that you're trying to go home because it's just completely going stupid. An $1,800 device can't do gestures correctly. Are you effing kidding me, Samsung? So that is another problem. And also one of the kind of benefits that they were advertising with the release of Android 12L was their little smart dock. Guess what you ain't getting with a smart launcher? A smart dock, because it's not smart. Samsung, at the very beginning, completely disabled it. Now you can enable it, but it still doesn't really work, so no point having it enabled anyway. And it's not like it has a problem. It's an Android feature. It should work with basically any kind of launcher I would expect. So either Android is dropping the ball or Samsung, which I am more keen to believe that it's Samsung. I'm not gonna kind of sugarcoat it. I am a little bit more against Samsung here, because I believe if Android releases something like Android 12L after several years of it being in development, I would expect them to have a general idea that people will most likely use launchers on their device. So yeah. And also, I'm not exactly sure if the actual like dock that you have is part of Android 12L or if it's just something that Samsung implemented. It might be actually a Samsung implementation, which would probably explain why it's not really working with third-party launchers. So that's one of those things that I was kind of excited. That's one of the reasons I actually went for the 4 instead of a 3 Fold. And it's one of those things that I just cannot use because I am relying on my third-party launcher, and I'm not willing to part ways with that. I am more keen to part ways with the little smart dock or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I lose that, but at least I have my launcher. So there we go. And I think that would about sum up. Now, one more thing that I'll just touch upon just so you can see the state of the screen. Let me just quickly grab in a little cloth and clean it off. And you'll see that at least the display itself has been holding up pretty well. I didn't really experience any kind of problems with it. It's pretty solid. The foil ain't coming off anywhere, at least not that I have seen so yet. And there we go. So you can see the display is pretty nice. I do have this little thing right here as the only bump that I had, and I think I got it the first week that I've been using it. And the way I got this this little bump right here is by placing it on a little stand. I have a Newfie AR60 keyboard with its little pouch, and that can double as a kind of like a phone tablet stand. And at one point it was charging, so it was placed like this, plugged in to charge, and I think I bumped into a cable and pulled the phone over with it, and it hit the keyboard. And even though the keyboard is low profile, so the keys technically, I would expect, didn't hit the display really, and also it just fell. If I bring this keyboard in, obviously imagine that this is a low profile keyboard and not like a full one, and also has a flat profile instead of curved one. So the device was kind of like this, fell like this onto the on the display, obviously, unfortunately, and made this little bump. There was no like hard drop, and that's basically what I get. Any other device wouldn't have any kind of problem with this. So there we go, that's my little reminder not to use that pouch, because this display is as fragile as my ego. Anyway, so that basically sums up my overview. And now I will mention one more thing which I did want to kind of touch upon. When I did the initial review of the Fold 4, I did say to pick up a Fold 3, and it might seem kind of like a hypocritical decision to pick up a Fold 4 when I'm telling people to pick up the third one because it's cheaper. And obviously didn't really change much in terms of quality of the device. They both had under display cameras, they both shared about majority of the same features. And honestly, the reason why I picked up the fourth one instead of the third one, because I was going to pick up the Fold 3 instead of 4, was strictly because I scored a significantly amazing deal. So I paid significantly less than the $1,800. I think I paid more like $1,200 for my device. And at $1,200, this was just a titsy bit more than the Fold 3, which was coming at about 11, maybe a little bit below $1,100. So paying just $100, maybe $150 more, I got this. Obviously a no-brainer here. You get a much more powerful processor, and obviously in both cases the devices were new. So that's why I picked up this one. Without this kind of deal, I would most certainly gone with the Fold 3 instead. And I would still recommend, well, honestly, I don't know if I would recommend Samsung, to be honest. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I obviously got it for a good price. Otherwise, I would have been using Fold 3. Now, I did actually remember one more thing that I wanted to touch upon. So obviously, one of the biggest selling points of this device is the fact that it folds and unfolds, right? And you get a bigger canvas. Now, if you're thinking, I'm gonna watch movies, shows on it, right? On the internal display, not really worth it. You will use significantly more battery life using this display, obviously, than using the outer one. And if you consider other devices, a normal one, non-folding, then the screen size of that device, a non-folding one, will give you about the same screen real estate for media content as this does. This device is good for tasks that require bigger display in general. So for instance, trading, when you open up something like do I have it? For instance, Trade of 8, that's a good app for it. I did also have something else here. Trading View obviously is one of the better ones, so it works really well with Trading View. But obviously for things like YouTube, kind of pointless. For what else? Gaming, I guess that really differs depending on a game. Sometimes games will support it, sometimes they won't. One thing that I did actually use this for was GeForce Now, and at the beginning GeForce Now didn't have any kind of support. Now they added 5:4 aspect ratio, which does basically fit this device almost perfectly, but not quite. It just leaves a smidge of a black bars on top and bottom. And also most of the games that you will access, at least ones that I have tested, don't really support this kind of aspect ratio. So either they will have cut out content because the content can be smooshed this much to 5:4 aspect ratio when it was usually just designed, the UI of a game was designed for a 16:9. So that gives you a little bit of a problem, though the game will still work. And some games just strictly won't support this kind of aspect ratio, so they will give you just straight up black bars on top and bottom, filling that 16:9 aspect ratio and having just black bars on top and bottom. And obviously at that point, if you're having those bars, it kind of, you can ask the question, why buy a phone like this when most of the content that you will be utilizing on a bigger display, the content isn't designed for this kind of display. And that is apparent in a lot of different cases. So at the end of the day, if you're thinking about picking up in general a folding device, do make sure that you will utilize the display with the apps that you tend to use, because I can probably guarantee you that most of the apps that you think you will be using and enjoying in this kind of bigger form factor won't necessarily be enjoyable in this form factor. And one thing that this phone does succeed is at multitasking. I personally got it just for the bigger screen. I wanted to have a bigger screen at any time that I need it. But like I said, to me that came with a bit of a disappointment, because the apps that I would want to have on a bigger screen didn't give me that benefit of it. So that was my problem with this device. I still do like the device. It still brings a lot of versatility to what I do on a daily basis. Obviously it's super fast, so that's obviously a bonus, but hindsight, obviously 2020, if I would be buying a phone now, I probably would stay away from Fold specifically, because the fragility of the display makes me kind of care for it like a baby, even though I don't carry any case. The phone is already chunky enough, so that's why I don't carry a case. And the bigger canvas is not utilized in most of the things I use this device on a daily basis for, making it kind of useless. So I would probably pick up a normal smartphone, a candy bar one with a 16:9 aspect ratio, just a little bit bigger, considering they're now a little bit taller. But still, whatever I'll be watching, I'll utilize more of that display for the content that I want, while paying less and still having basically as much power as this phone does. It's Snapdragon 8 Gen 8 Plus Gen 1, and nowadays there are phones with this processor that cost basically $1,000, which is almost half of the price of this device. And even though I scored a fantastic deal, if I compare it to something like a Chinese phones like Xiaomi as an example, I still overpaid for this device quite significantly. So if we obviously compare it to Candy Bar, Xiaomi does have foldable devices, and they're obviously more expensive than the Candy Bar versions, but still I would argue that they're still, well, I don't need to argue, they are still cheaper than this, coming at around $1,200, which is about the price of a Galaxy S22 Ultra. So yeah. And one more thing that I actually wanted to mention is, comparing it to other foldable devices, is the Crease. So because Samsung wants to have their device be waterproof, that's why we have this Crease. They cannot figure out a way to make Crease a less pronounced like this one, while still keeping the waterproofing of a device. Personally, I might be in minority, I don't know. I'm just gonna put it out there. I would prefer my device to not be waterproof and not have the Crease, which is the case for most of the Chinese foldable devices. They tend to have a significantly less visible crease because they do fold the device completely differently in a teardrop kind of shape. So the crease doesn't need to be as harsh, and also when it's unfolded it's almost not visible. But because of that, the phone doesn't have any kind of waterproofing, and I personally would be fine with this kind of trade-off. And another thing that this device has that the Chinese don't is little like a locking method of it. I don't take many photos with my device, so having it be, for instance, if I can place it like this as a camera tripod almost, it's okay. But the only time I use this specific kind of locking in so I can place it at whatever angle I want is when I'm watching videos in my bed, just like YouTube. I'll place it literally on my chest like this, in this kind of tent mode, and view this screen, the small one. Either that, or I can just place it like this. That's the only thing I use this kind of hinge for, that locks in whatever position you put it. And actually, talking about a hinge, there's one more thing that I wanted to touch upon, which is number one, when I open it up, it's not really opening up all the way. It has just a little bit of a bow. So just to kind of show it, now it's fully open. But it has this like lock right here, and then there we go, it flips open. Now at the very start it would flip fully open, so kind of like this. Now it doesn't. And also I do just love to hear weird creaking sounds from, I don't know, my hinge or the display. So not sure if this will be picked up on a camera, but I will try. So I'll just kind of like fold it open and close. Not sure if you can hear that. Hopefully you could. If not, I don't think there's much I can do. But there is like this weird sound like the display when it's opening, I believe, or it could be the hinges. And that's also one of the things that were not hearable at the very beginning, but now there are. And there's no dirt in here. That's not like grinding noise. It's more like a plastic unfolding, like a soft plastic almost, which that's why I have a suspicion that it's just the display. But still, it's a little bit unsettling that I hear a sound like this. So there we go. That's my overview of this device after using it for about half a year now, close to it. And if you found this video, pretty lengthy one, informative in some way, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and thanks for watching.